Today, I'm talking to Professor Bart Kay. In our discussion, we'll talk about Professor Kay's experience on carnivore, his thoughts on why plant-based advocates are so anti-carnivore, and Professor Kay's experience working in organizations where the status quo is not to be questioned. I really enjoyed this discussion with Professor Kay, and I'm sure you will too. And I think we covered areas that you don't always hear Professor Kay talk about. If you enjoy this video, I'd appreciate it very much if you could click like and also subscribe. And consider supporting me by becoming a channel member. You can do that by clicking the join button under this video. That said, let's talk to Professor Kay. What was the point that you realized for yourself that carnivore was the way to go?
When I tried it. And when I tried it was when I kind of heard about it as an idea, because I'd been ketogenic for about 27 years up to that point. And when I first kind of heard about it, it was like, oh, that makes sense to me. I'm going to try that. And I've always been the sort to be first to be on the side of doing something counter to the accepted wisdom, because accepted wisdom is usually nonsense. And I found some benefit in doing it. So I thought, oh, well, this not only makes sense, but my experience is that it actually does help too. So I'm going to keep doing it.
What was the point after you started that you actually realized, oh, well, actually there is something to this, you know, I'm benefiting in this particular way?
Yeah, I think it was a few months in, 3 or 4 months in, that I first started to really think about it and realize, understand, notice a few things had improved beyond where they already were. Things like my mental health disposition improved. I had an issue with quite serious fibromyalgia, which seems to now be a thing of the past. My inflammatory status seems to be at an all-time low. My digestion is the best it's ever been at large, except for when I transgress, because I'm a human being and do naughty things sometimes, like Pop-Tarts or whatever. No, I don't eat Pop-Tarts. That's a step too far even for me. I suffer for having done that. It's never a good thing. It seems like it's my body just reminding me how bad it was when I was regularly doing those kind of things. So not only does being good lead you to good health, it also seems to encourage you to stay there.
I would agree. So as a professional in the area of nutrition, when it comes to this kind of thing, do you think carnivore is for everyone?
Yes. There is obviously a range of ways of approaching your nutritional lifestyle that you will be able to do okay with. When I talk about what's optimal, I really have to imagine that we're talking about the average person. And that has to, by its very habit of generalizing in that way, it does tend to exclude people who are at one or other end of the bell-shaped curve. So there are people out there who will do better on slightly different approaches. But in terms of your physiology, your organ systems, your body plan and design, your biological background, basically your genetic gift, all of that, I mean, ideally, we are carnivores. We did not evolve eating any significant amount of plant material at all. That is a fact. We have that established using actual science, looking at the bones of human and pre-human skeletal remains, as it turns out, over with ages over, spreading over hundreds of thousands of years. And we can trace what human beings definitely did eat. And it's a very, very clear story in terms of, well, for a start, the nitrogen isotope testing that's been done on the collagen derived from long bones of human skeletal remains of all ages, up to about 11, 12,000 years ago, when we all decided for some reason that it was a great idea to grow grasses and live off the seeds of those grasses and domesticate animals and all of that kind of thing, instead of hunting animals and eating them. Up to that point, it was really clear what we were eating. So therefore, that informs the inputs that have informed our evolution according to positive and negative selection pressures.
Do you think there's ever a case for someone to be on a plant-based diet or eating some level of plant material?
Some level of plant material, there may be arguments for, in terms of a person's experience of the world, for some reasons. Normally, the kind of people that do need some are the people whose systems have become dependent on it because of the abuse of overdoing that over a period of years. And as such, their metabolism, their bodies are so badly damaged that it's a difficult task to get them switched back across to their genetically designed ideal diet, the carnivore diet. And so we have to be a bit flexible with some people that we work with. Some people who have severe damage, we need to work with it a bit. But is there an argument that any human being should ever be on a fully plant-based or vegan style diet? The answer is absolutely, unequivocally not. No, under any circumstances.
That's kind of a good segue into a question that I had for later, but maybe it's appropriate now. So you see a lot of these plant-based foods and fake meats and stuff like that saying, 20 grams of protein in this fake meat burger or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is your body actually going to get any of that protein?
It really depends from plant slop to plant slop as to how much of the protein contained in that plant slop is actually absorbable, usable by the human for its means. And it's not only the accessibility of individual amino acids due to various anti-nutrients, toxins, and things that plants, tactics that plants have evolved in order to discourage animals from eating them. But it's also the makeup of amino acids, because you won't get a whole complete protein from any plant source. You'd need to combine different plants at different stages to get the full spectrum of required amino acids, and it makes it a complex task.
And that would go the same for something like iron. For example, if you're eating spinach to get your iron, that's not necessarily the best place to be getting your iron from?
No, quite right. It's absolutely one of the worst places that you can attempt to get iron from. The iron that your body needs has to be in a specific format, and that's called heme iron, Heme iron. That is iron which is biocollated to a specific protein, the heme protein. The only place that you can derive such iron is from animal sources. Plants don't have heme. So what you're getting when you say this spinach contains X amount of iron, what they're telling you is that it contains that amount of elemental iron. That iron is not biocollated to a heme protein, and as such, not only is no good for your needs in terms of what it's for in the human body, but also it's toxic, highly toxic to have any amount really of elemental iron floating around in your system. And it will cause all sorts of problems if you can actually absorb that iron. But usually most plants disallow that with anti-nutrients to blockade the uptake of that iron anyway. So, you'd be doing well.
Wow. So this kind of makes me think about multivitamins and supplements. When we're taking multivitamins and supplements, like I guess for example, I'm anemic. So one of the things that I would be trying to take, certainly in the past, would be iron supplements.
Mm.
Are they similar in a way to plant-based sources of iron, that they don't get taken up by the body as well?
Mostly, with the exception that there is a number of companies who are offering iron supplements in the heme form, which is great. But that said, why wouldn't you just go and get that from eating meat? Because that's where it comes from.
Right. So they're actually producing those iron supplements. They're somehow extracting that from the beef, or is that
The exact
synthetic?
methodology by which they are getting the heme protein and adhering it, biocollating it to the iron in their supplement, I'm not sure of the manufacturing process. I could go and find out. I suspect that it's not directly derived from meat. I suspect that they have a technology to transcribe the heme protein.
Kind of taking a step back, why is there such opposition from plant-based advocates to something like the carnivore diet and even keto, really?
Right. I think the first and foremost issue is that people who follow, for example, wholly plant-based or vegan style lifestyles, for example, mostly those people are driven absolutely by theology and not by science, common sense, a concern for actually their own health or anybody else's. It's an opportunity for those who are also an opportunity for those who are vulnerable to the whole idea of being a virtue signaling prat. You know, there are people who can, oh, there's a way for me to virtue signal. Absolutely, I'll be a vegan and scream it from the rooftops and say a bunch of stuff about how meat is bad without backing any of that up with anything. It's a tribal thing. It's a factional thing. It's a sociological issue. Because if we want to settle this with science, such that the science is in regard to human nutritional requirements, etc., then it's really quite a very easy task for someone who is competent of scientific critiquing skills to go through this, as I have done over a number of years professionally in academia, and subsequent to that, over a shorter number of years as a YouTube influencer espousing these ideas. It's really very simple. It's really very straightforward to point to what's important here and go, right, that's what informs how we should feed ourselves. Now, as long as what I'm saying is associated at large with positive anecdotes, positive outcomes, people improving their life, then there's no reason for me to give any different advice. However, we know for a fact, the numbers are clear, that 84% of people who are ever sucked into the vegan ideology, the vegan theology, 84% of those people quit. They do that within 5 years at large. And 90% of those people cite the reason for quitting the theology as catastrophic health failure, which, as it turns out, is usually born of the nutrient deficiency, which you'll find on such a diet. So there is nothing to be argued here. There is no science that supports any idea that humans should eat any amount of plants, let alone a whole bunch of them, let alone being exclusively plant eaters. In fact, the science, the inference such that it is, points directly the other direction for anyone with a competent faculty of scientific critiquing skills. So that's what's behind it. It's feels. It's people's belief structures.
So I understand that, and I kind of, even with my rudimentary understanding of things, not being a scientist or anything, I can kind of go, well, obviously we're pointing, eating meat and stuff, that's pointing in the direction of what we should be doing. But when there's so much science and so much evidence behind meat eating, as being like the optimal kind of diet, and wholly plant-based as being nutrient deficient.
Mm.
Why are there so many vocal doctors out there that publicly criticize the carnivore diet?
Well, you could apply the adage that you should never necessarily apply malice where stupidity will serve as an explanation. So there is a fair amount of that. There are a number of duly qualified medical practitioners running around saying things that are frankly stupid, ignorant, misinformed, ill-educated, moronic in the extreme. The mere fact that they hold a qualification that would entitle them to practice medicine does not actually make them an expert in any other field other than allopathic medicine, which has nothing whatever to do with nutrition science or nutrition. I shouldn't say nutrition science, Dave, because there isn't any. That's for another day. It's a bunch of words that have been written in a format for publication in a bunch of different journals over a bunch of different years. None of it actually proves anything. But we can do that in another discussion. And there are always ways to poke holes in any paper that you could put in front of me. And I've shown it before. I can do it in minutes. You show me a paper and I'll show you what's wrong with it, sort of thing. So in as much as that, people often say to me, well, you're working just as much from a point of view of theology as those who have antithetical views to you, aren't you? To which I say, fair comment, but not actually strictly correct, because my ideas are based on first principles. Skip the science, such that it is because it's nonsense, and then go to the, well, let's look at results anecdotally. When people go carnivore, what happens to their health? Because they're not doing anything different from that using prospective cohort studies, really. They're just dressing up their anecdotal stories as pseudoscience so that people who don't have a competent faculty of statistical analysis will go, oh, that's above my understanding, ergo it's great science, and we should trust it. Trust the science, Dave. I'm the science. Don't question the science.
This brings up a question that I've wanted to ask you for a while that I hadn't actually planned on. Think about my situation just working in a business environment. Over the years, working in a business environment, when I kind of I see processes within the business that kind of I don't think are functioning the best, or I think, why are we doing this process? We could be doing this much better than this. So I end up, because of that, I end up asking a lot of questions, and I end up, pushing back on things a lot. And what I've found over the years is that people don't like that. They don't like someone who goes, generally speaking, they don't like someone who pushes back against things and asks questions about things, right? And that kind of rubs people up the wrong way. And you end up being an enemy to most people. And it's like, oh, this guy's going to say something about this as well. So I kind of feel like that would be the same for people like yourself or Dr. Kim Berry or Dr. Chafee, or people who ask questions and are willing to say, no, hang on, I don't think that the narrative is the generally accepted narrative is necessarily correct. So can you speak about that a little bit in your experience, like when you've been working in universities or you've been doing research and stuff like that? Have you ever experienced that where people get frustrated that you want to ask questions or you want to push back on particular ideas?
Absolutely. It's one of the reasons that eventually, after several decades in academia, I came to a place where I went, okay, is this going to change? Or am I going to continue to butt heads for as long as I want to try and be in this industry? Is the stress, distress, wear and tear on me, for, let's face it, probably 80 grand a year maximum as a mid-level academic, is that worth it? And I had to quickly decide, no, it wasn't. The competing interests, Dave, for me always were that there are several things that exist in academia which both exist, but they are at odds. So it's like the immovable force versus, the irresistible force versus the immovable object sort of thing. Which one takes precedence? And what it is that in every Western, I was going to say reasonable Westernized nation, are there any left? I don't know. In most nations that have universities and the university structure and all of that, most of those countries have a law ingrained in the very legislation in those countries that suggests that any academic is free to hold and espouse any opinion they should see fit for any reason, whether that is popular or otherwise. In other words, it's like free speech applied specifically to the academic environment. I am allowed to have an opinion and I'm allowed to espouse it. You can't stop me. Then you get asked to teach a course on electrophysiology, just for an example. And I say, certainly I'll teach that course on electrophysiology, and here's what I'm saying to students about it. Here are the facts, here is the biochemistry, here are the physics. It looks like everything that you've learned so far on this is wrong. Whoops. Oh, no, you can't say that to students. Our curriculum document says what it says in the textbook, and that's what you're required to teach. No, it isn't. I am free to hold and espouse any opinion to anybody, be they students, the general public, the readership of academic journals, or anybody else, in any format I should see fit, so long as I'm not breaking any laws. If I want to say it's different to what you've been taught, and here is the reason I'm saying that, I'm entitled to do it. And assess the students on their ability to absorb that information and differentiate the classic so-called wisdom with, well, here's a new understanding or a better understanding based on the actual reality in which we find ourselves. Disciplined view of things rather than, well, here's that word again, a theological view. So you bet I spent 20-something years butting heads with deans of various departments who have been wanting to tell me, you can't say that to students, and me saying, yes, I can. Please try and bully me. That will make my life easier.
And do you eventually feel like you're just banging against the wall? Like another day at work is just going to be, it's just going to be more of the same?
Well, I did, the last academic contract I had at a university provider was at a university, happens to be in the United Kingdom. And I was there for a fixed period of 3 years to teach out the final class that university was ever going to teach in this subject area, and then they were dropping the subject area. Hence, they employed someone for 3 years only. That suited me at the time. I didn't want a permanent academic posting. I had sort of relatively recently moved to the UK with the girl I'd married, who happened to be a UK native, and I was re-establishing myself there, and that was fine. So I did that 3-year contract and experienced some of the worst attempted bullying, attempted intimidation, attempted overbearing tactics by a dean of a department trying to tell me what I can and can't say to students and failing, as every single dean who'd ever tried it before him also failed. Anyway, the fixed term of employment elapsed, and funnily enough, they didn't want to redeploy me somewhere else in the department, and funnily enough, I didn't want to stay there. And at that point, I thought to myself, is this ever going to change? I've now taught at that stage in 9 different university-level institutions on 4 different continents, and they've all been the same in terms of how this is. Do I want to put myself through that again for another, well, I'm 51 years old now, and nominally you'd retire at 65 or 70. And I just sat down and got a piece of paper out, really, mentally. I didn't actually have to physically get a piece of paper. I'm above that, Dave. I can do this mentally. And I went, right, left side pros, right-hand side cons. Let's lift them out. Right, cons, pros. A middling salary, no respect from a number of people in my peer group who believe themselves to be superior to me because they're better at complying with rules, when actually what it is they're vastly inferior because of their inability to think for themselves or be an individual in any way. And I just went, no, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to go and be a YouTube creator instead and influence people in a different way. And I'm glad I did. I'm not saying that being an online influencer is an easy road. It's not. But I'll tell you what, it's a lot less stressful than trying to bull your way through a culture that is not designed for people operating at the level that I'm operating at.
What was that feeling like at that point where it was like, because I assume at that point when you made that list of pros and cons, you didn't have a YouTube channel at that point. So like this was like complete unknown. So
Yes.
how long ago was that? And you know,
So that
what did
was
that feel like making that decision?
okay. Right. So the academic year finished in September of 2018 was the last time I was working at a university. So I have basically, roughly nearly 5 years, I guess, of being my own man, doing my own thing, building up a self-employed income through being an online influencer, privately consulting with people, and also marketing a range of fantastic nutraceutical products. I actually earn more doing that with those three income streams combined than I ever did as an academic, which is a good thing. My stress is vastly better. My mental health is vastly better. My self-esteem is vastly better. And let's face it, my life situation is better as a result of that. At the time, it was terrifying. I had nothing to go to. I didn't have a channel, as you say, set up. I didn't have second income streams. All I had was a history of working in academia for several decades against the current and being at quite a low point health-wise, both physically and mentally as a result of that. It's very, very draining and destructive to be in an environment where you are constantly boiling away with cortisol and resentment and holding a stiff upper lip and being polite to people who you'd sooner elbow in the gizzards or something, and being professional with people that you'd sooner not, sort of thing. So yeah, it was. I mean, I really felt like that it was a loss because I don't know if many people get it, but a lot of times when a person sets up a given career path, changing to something else, I mean, that career path becomes your very identity, and stepping away from it is almost like leaving yourself behind and stepping out into this great unknown. So yeah, it was terrifying. There was a lot of, but I'm glad I did it because it's a poisonous, destructive environment. Even in the couple of decades that I was involved in academia, the whole culture of academia changed entirely just in that period, which is incredible because academia moves pretty slowly on most things. But it turned from when I started, it changed into, over 20 years or so, it changed into something completely different, whereby suddenly at the end of it, now the most important metrics for a university, instead of performance of students, meeting the standards, promoting the area in which we're working, instead, now the key metric is the student experience. How did the students feel about what it was that they experienced in your classroom? And the every child wins a prize mentality, and the your opinion is valid too. And I think it's the whole society, not just in universities, but the whole society actually changed hugely in the last 20 years. And I was neither prepared for those changes, nor did I expect them to occur in academia, because I always held it in my mind as a bastion of science, dispassionate, looking at things for answers and applying the same standard to everybody. And if you didn't meet the standard, then you repeat the course. Not, well, how was your experience? And here's a certificate anyway. Instead of, holding people up to the required level, we now lower the lowest common denominator down to fit our curve to where it should be. It's disgraceful. It's all disgraceful. Most people that have come away from a university with a degree in any topic in the last, 10 years at least, if not 20, that certificate for most people probably isn't worth the ink that's written with, or the paper that it's written on, in terms of its establishment of that person's credentials to profess in an area.
You mentioned one word there that I think is actually part of, it alludes to the problem at universities now, or just in society generally, I think, is, before it was meant to be a dispassionate look at things. It was meant to be able to say, okay, well, I'm going to put my beliefs about things to the side, and I'm just going to look at the facts of the situation and measure it dispassionately and decide on the result based on that. But I think these days it almost seems to be like, if you take the dispassionate view, that's great, provided you still agree with me.
Yes.
If you disagree with me, then that means we can't be friends anymore, or you're offending me.
Yes, that's hate speech, Dave. You can't disagree with someone's theologically held belief structure.
And I mean, I remember as a kid growing up, like as young as, I don't know, 10 or 11 years old, I knew there were things that people just didn't talk about. Particular topics people just didn't talk about because people didn't want to get into that, oh, well, you're this kind of person, so I can't be your friend anymore, right? We focus on topics that even if we disagreed, then we could kind of have a laugh about, or something like that, so we wouldn't talk about religion, or we wouldn't talk about politics and stuff like that. But all that seems to have gone out the window, and that seems to have infected universities.
Yeah. Now, not only are there a wider range of acceptable topics for discussion and broadcast of ideas, but there's also now an accepted view that you must adhere to, otherwise you get cancelled. You don't get to espouse that. That's not acceptable anymore, which is a real problem.
It is. Yeah. So you talked about, going out on your own and, starting those income streams up. So one of the things that you do is you've got a consultancy service. Can you talk about who benefits from a consultancy service? What kind of person?
Yeah, you bet. Okay, so I run a calendar of X number of days a week where I'm nominally in clinic in the office here, and people wherever they may be in the world that book in for a slot then dial in to talk to me over Zoom, as it turns out, but we can use, other platforms as well. Other platforms are available for balance. And there are largely there are groupings of sorts of clients I get. These are people who have watched my YouTube material and gone, this is someone who knows what he's talking about, and I want to cross-check some ideas with him and get a second opinion on something. So there's quite a bit of that. And people will say, look, I've got these questions. Can I just rattle through my questions for the next hour? And I, fine, absolutely, ask away. I shall do my best to answer them or whatever. The second group of people who book for consults are people who are having issues, largely because usually because they have transitioned from a standard diet to a carnivore diet overnight very suddenly, thinking that it's a good idea. Oh, I'm going carnivore tomorrow. And they do that, and that causes them real problems because you need to adjust your body to a different diet slowly over a number of weeks. You should never change your diet from anything to anything else on the spot. And so helping those people restore control of their body and get things back into the right shape, etc. The third group are people who are the worried well, actually, and who just want reassuring. I got this cholesterol test last week and it showed that my cholesterol is high and my doctor's telling me I need to take statins. What do you think? To which, I have set answers for those things as well. So they're largely the sort of people that would book in to have a 1-hour consultancy with me. And there are a number of those people who will have one or two of those every month, actually, and have an ongoing subscription service to an hour of FaceTime with myself to ask questions or get reassurance or get some suggestions on how they might react to a health problem that's going on right now. That's basically how it runs. I need to make it clear I'm not a physician. I do not give medical advice. People often ask me about various medications that they've been prescribed, which I can talk about in a generalized way with some pretty good understanding of the pharmacokinetics and physiology involved. But I always make it clear to my clients, look, this is not medical advice. I'm not telling you to take that or not take that. I'm just saying to you that in your shoes, here is what I personally would do where you are, sort of thing. And that's the consultancy arm of the business. That's the second most busy, valuable, income-wise stream of the kind of three main streams that I'm trying to make a living doing. And I'll keep doing those as long as I possibly can. But there'll be a limit to how long I can do it. So people that want consultancies should book in now. Really? Yeah.
So with the understanding that this is not medical advice, do you think there's ever a place for a medication like you mentioned statins? Do you think there's ever a place for a statin?
Never. In the particular case of statin medications in particular, is there ever an indication where a person not only must, but should even be on a statin? The answer in my mind is absolutely unequivocally not. I would not personally touch a statin with a 10-foot barge pole under any circumstances. They are, based on my understanding of the pharmacology of the things and what they do in the human body, they are a dangerous contraindicated metabolic poison, which is, if anything, likely to lead you to an vastly increased likelihood of various disease processes, actually, and provide no real benefit, whatever establishable benefit in terms of heart disease outcomes, cause and effect.
Yeah, certainly. I haven't heard many glowing reports. You don't hear many people saying, I took these statins and now I'm feeling the best I've ever felt in my life.
Funny that. That's what happens when you poison people. They don't tend to feel great.
So what's one thing that people could change about their eating or something about their lifestyle that's going to have the biggest impact in the short term?
Right. So my whole practice, my whole really encapsulated advice, if you want to think of it as advice, it really isn't. It's just, this is how I approach life. This is what I do. This is what works for me. And you can too, if you want. I focus on 5 things. Well, really, I focus on one thing, but I deal with that one thing with 5 hacks that deal with that one problem, if that makes better sense. The one problem that people experience that is absolutely, in my mind, based on my understanding of the physiology and all of that, one thing that is underpinning most health concerns experienced by most people is this nasty thing called chronic systemic inflammation. It is absolutely at the root cause of heart disease, most strokes, obesiogenesis, type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes as an inflammatory immune response as well. Most forms of dementia, all the big killers. When you look at the mortality statistics of a Western society, this many heart attacks, this many strokes, etc., 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 you take all the big ones, the most part of that pie chart, they are all inflammatory immune disorders. So what we need to do to maximize our health span and lifespan likelihood, in my mind, is to take care of 5 life hacks to reduce that inflammation. The first one is a 100% carnivorous diet. Muscle meats, and associated fat of large ruminant animals, mostly, if you please, grass-fed if that's possible. If not, don't worry. We won't come and steal your card and point at you and say you did it wrong because you didn't eat grass-fed. You can cook it too if you like. It doesn't need to be raw. And also, if you don't want to eat organs, don't. You don't need to. Nutrition-wise, there's no requirement. And what I would say is, if you are going to eat organs, avoid liver. Certainly don't overdo liver. That's my take on that. But that's a discussion for another day as well. So that's number 1, carnivore diet. Don't change your diet to carnivore overnight tonight because you've seen this video. Oh, that's a good idea. I'm doing that. No. Change to a carnivore diet slowly over a number of weeks of progressively removing the offending material until it's all gone. Okay? Step number 2 is on a daily basis, you take the range of nutraceutical products from the company with which I am joint ventured, the only company whose product I promote in any way, anywhere online. This is a nutraceutical rather than a nutritional supplement. Sure, it has some things in it that they claim are of nutritional benefit, whatever, but I couldn't care less that those things are in these products, actually, and I'm not interested in that. I don't have any nutrition deficiencies in my diet of carnivore. These are specific nutraceuticals that have a specific effect. And the 2 effects that we get from those products are, 1, the release of adult stem cells, which then go off and find tissues in your body that need renewal and repair and replacement, and they do that. Isn't that great? And the other main product that we promote is a product which is anti-inflammatory. Powerfully anti-inflammatory without the side effects of the pharmacological nonsense. So I promote those for everybody. Everybody should be on those products religiously on a daily basis. And if you're not, it's either because you've never heard of this product or you didn't understand what I just said. Release your own adult stem cells, which can then go out to the tissues of your body, find cells that are old, worn, tired, diseased, dysfunctional for any reason, bind to that tissue, dissolve that cell that's not working properly anymore and become a new one, which does work. Isn't that fantastic? Do you need that in your life? You bet. Okay, step number 3, ground yourself electrically for as much of the time as is possible in your lifestyle. I ground about 20 hours a day. I sleep grounded. I'm currently grounded at my desk that I'm sitting at right now, the desk that you can't see, the invisible desk, if you like. The only time I'm not grounded is if I'm not sleeping or working. So about 4 hours a day, pretty much. So that's the next important one. The 4th step is to block blue wavelengths of light, especially artificial wavelengths, which would enter your eyes. Stop that from happening after dark. Once the sun's gone down below the horizon and it's nighttime, no more blue light. And you do that using amber colored blue blocking lenses, not clear ones, because they're not blue blockers. Because if you can see blue, it's not blocked, is it? Okay.
Sorry to interrupt, but just on that, I've seen a lot of those kind of glasses for sale on Amazon.
Yep.
And the percentage of blocking ranges from like 5% all the way up to 90-something%. Yep. What kind of percentage would you recommend for people?
Ideally, in terms of the blue wavelengths, you want 100 or as close to 100% blockade as you can possibly get, which will be dark amber colored lenses.
Got it. Thank you.
Not light amber, not yellow, not clear, certainly, because the lower the amount of color distortion, the less blue that's actually being blocked. Those are the physics. Sorry about that. So do that. Get blue light out of your eyes' experiences after dark and before the sun comes up again the next day. That is advice for people who are not shift workers, by the way. If you're a nighttime shift worker, there'll be different advice for you. You need to contact me for a consult about that. The first thing I'll say to you is probably, is there any way you can stop doing that? Is there any way you can change your career in such a way as to not be working when you should be sleeping, and vice versa? Because if you want to shorten your lifespan and health span, that's one of the best ways to approach it pretty quickly, actually. So there's that. And the fifth thing that I say on my list of 5 things that people should take very careful stock of is that you really need to do 3 or 4 sessions a week for 45 minutes or an hour at a time of high intensity, either burst and repeat and or resistance training activity, whole body split, if you please. Just one major exercise for each muscle group or joint complex. Say 10 to 12 exercises in a whole body split, half hour, 45 minutes, 2 sets of 8 reps with a weight that's so heavy that you could lift it 8 times, but not 9. Sure, have a warm-up set so you don't hurt yourself. Absolutely. That's it, really. If you do all those 5 things, will that absolutely eliminate any chance that you could possibly be inflamed or problematically inflamed? No, but it takes care of about 95% of the causes of inflammation in people's lives. So it's a great start. So that's where I'm really focused as general advice for everybody. Do these 5 things every day. Eat a carnivore diet, take some raw products, ground yourself electrically, block blue light after dark, and get some exercise 3 times a week, 4 times a week at high intensity.
Just back to some of the controversy around, plant-based versus carnivore. If you were debating a plant-based doctor, let's say, a Gregor or a Barnard or a Davis or something like that, and you've got to come out of the gate with one sentence that's going to be really super persuasive to your side of the debate. What would you say?
I guess it really depends on what they lead with. Whenever I'm in a debate situation, which is rare, to be honest, for the exact reason that almost nobody who actually has any intelligence or ability to debate whatsoever, most of those people won't touch me with a barge pole for a debate. The reason for that is that they know how it's going to go. They know that I'm absolutely able to deal with anything they're going to throw at me, and I'm going to make them look stupid, so they don't do it. Well, unless they are so arrogant that they think themselves to be the best debater in the world and that they're not going to get embarrassed. That's happened once. Of those people that you named, only one of them has actually fronted me ever for a debate. And that was
Goatee Boy. Which one was that?
Goatee Boy Garth Davis.
Garth Davis. Okay.
Yeah.
So
what happened was he was going to do a series of debate style discussions over half an hour or an hour with me on various different topics, and he was going to teach me a lesson because I was this whippersnapper that whatever, and he's the great Garth Davis. Anyway, we finally got it together to do the first session, which was a half-hour discussion as it turned out, where I eviscerated the boy. I made him look stupid with like one sentence, and he never fronted for the rest of the series of the debate. He went, whoops, this guy's going to tear me to bits week in and week out over and over again. And he ran away, basically, and ghosted me and has never responded to messages since, sort of thing. Usually my one-liner is going to be a specific retort to whatever it is they say. Reason being is that I've got the knowledge to whatever argument they throw at me, it's going to be one I've heard before, and I'm going to have it prepared. Here it is. Boof.
Let's imagine you're debating Michael Greger.
Now, if you don't eat your fruits and vegetables, you might
I'll be Michael Greger.
Oh, can you do it like this?
I'll be Michael Greger because I've got the beard.
Yeah, can you do it like this?
I'm going to open. I'm going to open with saturated fat causes diabetes. There you go. Case closed.
Okay, prove it.
All these people eating saturated fat, their pizzas and stuff like that, they're all fat. They're all getting diabetes.
Okay, pizza doesn't contain carbohydrates?
Yes, but it's mixed in with the saturated fat.
Right. Okay. Well, every time I see footage on television of a forest fire, there's always fire crews there. Did they cause the fire?
Well, no, but you're taking my my statement out of context.
Well, what's the context then? Because you've given me a cause and effect statement. You're saying this causes that, which would require you to produce a well-powered, well-tenured, well-controlled metabolic ward lock-in study with human beings over multiple decades, if that's what you want to infer results to, health outcomes over decades, that establishes your cause and effect relationship that you've proposed. So have you got one of those?
No, I don't. And of
Right.
course, so you win the debate, right?
That's it.
But
Yeah.
so the thing is, how do people like Michael Greger get away with going documentaries on Netflix and just saying
Mm.
this, saying diabetes causes, saturated fat causes diabetes?
Right. There are several things that conspire. Number one, for some reason, unbeknownst to me, in many Western societies, people with MD after their name, people who are medical doctors, are somewhat deified by the general populace at large, and they are imagined for some idea to know everything about the human body and its workings. No, their training is in a specific field of medical, diagnostic, and interventional practice, that being the allopathic model. That's all they know. The exact amount of training they get, for example, in the field of nutrition, in their entire training program of 8 years or 10 years, maybe an hour or two if you're lucky. They are not expert in physiology. They are not expert in human nutrition. They are not expert in anthropology. They are expert in allopathic medicinal practice, which is actually a paint by numbers process of if then. No thinking. Do as you're told, step out of line and we'll strike you off the medical register. Naughty boy, naughty girl. Or maybe you identify as a non-boy girl doctor. Maybe you're an attack helicopter doctor. Who knows? Okay. So that's the first thing. People deify doctors, and I've got no idea why. None at all. Secondly, there is a bunch of material which exists in the peer-reviewed literature which theologically, thematically, consensus-wise, may be taken to appear to support a given idea. And is written up as such because it's bought and paid for to be written up as such. The actual numbers, the actual empirical evidences upon which science is supposed to be built, that is what's absent from the equation here. There are, when you're talking about hard health outcomes in human beings over multiple decades, there are no data points available anywhere in the literature. There is nothing we can go to that says we understand what the relationships are here, cause and effect. We don't. We have ideas about it. There is that side of the argument that says plants are great for us and the more plants the better, and animal products are bad for us and we should avoid those, etc., etc., etc. That's a theology. That's a propaganda. That's a position statement. It's not the position of science or empirical evidence. You are expected as a lay consumer of such to just accept it. That's the science. That's what it says. You don't need to understand that it doesn't, actually, and please don't read it for goodness sake. We are the good grown-up adults from science, and we are here to tell you that. And your role is to doff your cap and to say, sir, thank you, sir, and go and amend your lives according to what I tell you you ought to do on the basis of no evidence at all. But we'll cash that check from the people that funded my research, of course.
Sounds like a Monty Python sketch.
It does, but it's reality. It's actually happening.
When people want to get in contact with you, Bart, what is the best way to reach out to you to find your content and also maybe to arrange a consultancy?
Excellent. Okay, so if you're on the YouTubes and you type in at BART-KAY, that will lead you directly to my main YouTube channel. I've got 4 or 5 others as well, which are all linked underneath every single one of the videos on my main channel in the show notes. So you can find all my material on YouTube there. If you want to find my material that used to be on YouTube but no longer is because YouTube changed the rules about what's acceptable, and so I had to move a bunch of material to another platform, then you would go to the Odyssey platform, Odyssee, and you would look up the Bart Kay Nutrition Science Watchdog channel, whereupon you'll find thousands of videos that I made over the years that no longer meet the YouTube standard of acceptability. So there's that. If you want to consult with me one-on-one, there is a bit.ly link, which you'll find also in the show notes under every single one of my videos, where there is a link out to the Patreon membership area. And therein you will find the ability to join at a tier, which gets you consultancies on a monthly basis. So you can organize that way. While you're there on that same bit.ly link, you will find links out to my merchandise store. You can buy fine things like this Meat Militia cup, for example, or various t-shirts, which are wildly amusing, of course, and say all sorts of great things. Also, while you're there, you will find a link directly to the nutraceutical product I was referring to earlier, the stem cell and anti-inflammatory stuff. It's called Cerule, Cerule, and you'll find the link out to that at the bottom right hand of the page. There are opportunities there for you to buy product as a retail customer if you'd like to, or if you'd like to join the team as an affiliate marketer, you can do that too, all at that same link, and you can get paid for promoting what really is a fantastic product. So those are the ways to get hold of me. Also, if you want to email me about anything specific, you can do that. My email address is on the About tab on my main YouTube channel. Do be aware that I get 1 or 2 emails, and as such, you might be waiting for a few days or more before I get back to you, but I will try to respond to any sensible emails I get from people. Some of them get nuked straight away because they're, do you know, Dave, there are people out there who don't think I'm great. Do you know, there's such a thing. Couldn't believe it myself. But no, that's how you get hold of me.
Nice. So, Bart, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I really appreciate it.
No, my privilege and my pleasure. I really do enjoy the opportunity to just kind of chat, really. Now that we're doing the fully manicured, highly processed, highly edited videos, because that's what YouTube want us to do, it's nice to do the longer form, just sit down and have a chat through. And I'm sure this gets edited, of course, and most of you won't get to see the whole glory of the full discussion, perhaps. Maybe you will. What are you going to do, Dave? You're going to post the whole thing or edit it?
I'll try and edit as little as possible. I'll edit out my ums and ahs, and then everything else pretty much will stay in.
Oh, good. All right. Anyway, as I say, a privilege and a pleasure. And we'll hopefully see you Saturday night, US time, Sunday morning, our time, very early Sunday morning, your time, perhaps, for the next Q&A session.
Guys, thanks for watching. Please don't forget to click like and subscribe, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next video.